And hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. As always, thank you so much for coming in. Really excited to see you guys. As always, put up an interesting poll the other day, so I wanted to get that going and just wanted to thank you for filling that out on richsportstalk.com. If you had seen that basically I had the New York Jets and the Giants news from the combine, and also what live stream you would perform today. And you guys, 73% of you wanted the Jets and Giants news, so I'm glad to get that going. And of course, I also put a new big board up there too. I will put the link in the chat right now if you'd like to discuss that too. It's my top 50 prospects. I've redone that. So that is also in the chat as well if you are interested. The new big board is up, but of course, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Jets and the Giants today. So thank you for joining us here. So much to talk about that. And a lot of news out of Indianapolis, both from both organizations, and both organizations having very different approaches. And I'm going to start a little bit with the Jets, go back to the Giants, kind of go back and forth a little bit. We'll talk about last night, some of the quarterbacks and receivers, especially. But I did want to talk about the Jets first because they did make some headlines earlier this week, which was basically Robert Saleh and the staff saying that they're not going to the combine, that Joe Douglas is there, scouts are there, but mainly for a lot of people, the coaching staff would go to the combine. That a lot of the coaching staff would be in attendance, they'd be here at the event, they'd be able to do it. And I believe only three coaching staffs aren't there. Sean McVay and the Rams, the 49ers, and the Jets. And there was a lot of negative around that with being, especially because the Jets, as we all know, have had 6 wins in the last 2 years, saying like, well, how could the coaching staff not be there? How could they not be at this event? How could they not be at their live? And I really don't think it's that big of a deal. And it's interesting too, because I've always been a proponent that the combine is just a small piece of the process. In the grand scheme of everything, it's going to be more about the tape, the individual workouts. And on top of that, if you really want to get into it, it's going to be about the interviews and the medical. So the Jets feel obviously that they have enough people there to conduct the interviews. Joe Douglas is conducting the interviews there, doing the medicals. So I can get why some Jet fans are frustrated, why some Jet members are not there. But we've also seen the combine also change over the last 2 years. I mean, we didn't have it for the 2020 draft. 2021, it was limited with COVID. And Robert Saleh, I do think, made a great point, which is that they're going to be studying film. They're going to be able to watch the combine from New Jersey, where they're going to be working from. And I really thought that in some ways was smart because free agency is right around the corner. That's the next big step for the Jets. Another advantage, too, is the Jets have already coached the Senior Bowl staff, which is highly invaluable for the hands-on coordination and being able to work with players. So I just really didn't think it was that big of a deal. And sorry about that. Just clearing my throat a little bit. But I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. And we've seen that you could, geez, I don't know what it is, but a little bit of a cough this morning. Sorry about that. But yeah, you've just seen over the last 2 years that it shifted where you can do more of this virtual. And I do think a lot of teams, even with the COVID protocols gone now in the NFL, they still like having this ability. They can still watch. And really, I believe the biggest thing from Indianapolis is going to be the interviews and the medicals for this Jet staff. And look, is the combine important? Yes. But you learn more from film. And really, the way I look at the combine is the combine is either going to really help you or really hurt you. Where you look, if someone shows really out of shape, that's going to be a big red flag, or a bad interview is going to be a red flag. But realistically, like we saw the receivers last night with the incredible 40 time, and that's actually really good too. IRL, HDR. It's interesting that all the coaching staff's not there are the Shanahan tree, and I didn't even think of that. But to me, like a lot of them is just it's about film study, it's about meeting the players, it's about the individuals, and a lot of people gave the Jets, flack for not being there, but they're still there. Joe Douglas is still there. The scouts are still there. And will the combine maybe push one person or two up their board because they had a better workout when some of the receivers last night with the incredible 40 times we were seeing? Could that maybe push someone if they're on the fence between two guys and maybe that gives a slight edge? Maybe, but the Jets are also a team that used to draft almost based on the combine, and we've seen how that's gone in the past. Like, I don't need to go too deep into it, but Vernon Golston and Stephen Hill ring a bell about two guys that blew up the combine. Everyone's jaw was on the floor about what they were doing in the 40, how they were looking in the verts. Like, they were two of the biggest combine stars we've ever seen, and both were major busts on the pro level. So the combine's important, but it's not everything. And again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. We have plenty of NFL draft content, more mock drafts coming your way. The latest Jets and Giants mock drafts are on the channel. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out. You can check us out on Twitter where I'm giving live updates. That's in the chat. And also richsportstalk.com. We have our second big board. Our top 50 is now up after the Senior Bowl. We'll be having a new one after the Combine. So if you want to go check out that content, please go check it out. If you're really into the draft, I really think you're going to love that. So get back to the Jets in a little bit. Actually, I'll do one other big piece of news from the Jets, and then I'll go back to the Jets in a little bit. But other really big news out of Indianapolis, which isn't getting huge pub because it was seemingly going to be obvious, but Quinnen Williams and the Jets have agreed on the fifth-year option. This is a great thing for the Jets. They've locked him in, and I don't believe they're going to give Quinnen the bag this offseason. Now, will things change if with this contract? It could Quinnen potentially, and I'm not going to say it, decide he doesn't want to play until he gets a new contract. It's certainly possible, but it is a good thing for this Jet team. They have a good young building block in Quinnen Williams, and I do believe he is eventually going to be paid because the Jets have made it clear that the offense and defensive line is where they want to make big investments, and really that starts with Quinnen Williams up front. So that was a big piece of news coming out of Indianapolis. But as we go to the other side, a lot coming out from the Giants camp, and there was a lot of conversation going on this week. And before I get into the meat and potatoes of what they're trying to do and what they've said that they're trying to do, one of the most interesting pieces of information that came out is that Joe Schoen, the new Giants general manager, is apparently open to trading Saquon Barkley. Now, this is a touchy subject for Giants fans I've seen on social media. Some Giant fans are completely done with Saquon. Some love Saquon and want to keep him in the building. A lot of people are looking at this situation and going, well, if they're not going to keep Saquon past this year, we don't want to pay Saquon. There's a whole lot to get into with Saquon, but this is what I truly believe, and this is what I think the Giants should do. Will they do this? I don't know, but this is what I would do. And it is kind of funny because if we looked at it from a Jets standpoint, it kind of mirrors what I've been saying with another player with the Jets, which is Denzel Mims. And Roberts, I was asked about him, saying he's crushing the offseason. But for Saquon, he's had 500-something yards over this last season. He's been hurt. He hasn't played in as many games. And we all know about him being the number 2 pick, what the Giants probably could have gotten for that number 2 pick. But we're here because of Dave Gettleman and because of this pick. And a lot of Giant fans are just saying, well, if we're not going to keep him, we should just trade him now. But I actually think that that's a bad idea. When you're making a trade in the NFL, you want to get as much back as possible. I mean, it's anytime you make a trade, that's obvious. But one of the most underrated aspects about trades in the NFL, in the MLB, any league basically, is the timing. timing is incredibly important when we talk about deals, when we talk about negotiations. And right now, the timing is not good for Saquon. You look right now, it's a new front office, it's a new regime. It's basically he's coming off one of his worst seasons. There's a lot of questions about his health and of course the contract. It's up in the air and it's not something I don't think any team really wants to pay for a running back. They don't want to pay a premium draft pick and then trade to get a running back. My thought to Saquon is do not trade him before the draft. And I understand that he has a cap hit and that the Giants are trying to open up $40 million worth of cap space. Joe Schoen talked about that extensively, and I'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk about the cap situation because the Giants have already started shedding some of that weight. But if you're the Giants and you want to get the most out of Saquon in a deal, you're probably better off at the trade deadline next season. And let me explain. You're hoping that Saquon, and again, there is risk to this method, but if you want to get the most out of Saquon, I believe the best way to do that is to have him come through training camp, look healthy, give this team a better offensive line through the draft and free agency, and let him have a great first couple games. He looks healthy, and if he's playing well because of the improved offensive line, that's going to raise his trade value. And when we get to the trade deadline, teams that are going for it are more open to giving up higher picks. They're more open to saying, you know what? This is our year. We're a piece or two away. We're going for it. What if we get to the midseason point and let's say, for example, Kansas City. Kansas City, let's say hypothetically, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's hurt or they're down to their running backs like we saw kind of this past year. And Saquon's on the market. And the Chiefs go, look, we're right now in first place, but we really want a good running back and another playmaker in the backfield. We're probably going to be picking between the 29th and 32nd pick. A first-round pick does not mean much to us. Maybe you could even get a first-round pick for Saquon, a late first-round pick, but still a first-round pick at the trade deadline for a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl. Where now I would be hard-pressed to see a team giving up a third-round pick because their argument's going to be, we know Saquon's a good player, but why are we trading for someone that's injury-prone and that we're going to have to give a big contract to? We're not going to give you a good draft pick and not sign him. It just doesn't make sense. If anything, the best I think you're going to see a team do is maybe a high fourth-round pick as a flyer pick. And if you're the Giants, it just doesn't make sense. And the other thing, too, is in my scenario, you give your young quarterback, Daniel Jones, you give him a great running back for at least half a season. So at least you can get a better evaluation out of your quarterback, which is more important. And I understand the argument saying, well, if the Giants aren't going to give him a long-term deal, what's the point of keeping him around? We need the cap space now. And that I get it. I get that argument. But if you're really trying to maximize the value, and this is let's be honest, Giant fans, like this is realistically a 2 or 3 year plan. It's kind of like what the Jets went through last year. And I know Giant fans don't want to hear it because like the Jets, they're in a playoff drought. It's been hard the last couple of years. They've been told they're rebuilding the last couple of years. But you're looking right now, realistically, this offseason is prepping for probably the future quarterback, which will not be on the roster until next year. Because they can say all they want about Daniel Jones, but I just have a feeling that at the end of the day, they're going to get to the end of the season next year and they're going to look and say, because Washington's already rumored to be in the quarterback market. If Washington somehow lands a big fish, I don't think they will, but I mean, they're trying. But if let's say Washington gets a good quarterback and then you're the Giants in your division with Dak, and say what you want about Dak, but Dak is a legitimate top 10 quarterback. And the Washington gets a good quarterback, and the Eagles somehow figure out their quarterback with Jalen Hurts. That's going to be very tough in this division, and you're going to need a good quarterback. So I believe this offseason is going to be a lot about finding the pieces to put around a young quarterback, and it's really just trying to help Daniel Jones develop. But if you want to really get a fair evaluation, you got to give him Saquon for the first couple games. And my thought process again was you have to still be doing that. IRL, great comment. I'll get to that right in a section. Joe Champion, Bailey Diombo, Chris Johnson are the only great players to run a sub 4-3 and have great careers. Yeah, just because and that was the thing too. Like you saw it last night with the 40-yard dashes, and my favorite was like they had to get the official times afterwards because I guess they were a little slower. But the kid from Baylor was originally ran the 4.21. I believe they found it was a 4.28. But I mean, you look, the Giants are a great example. I mean, Ross on the Giants ran the fastest 40 ever, and you could say his career has been kind of a disappointment just because you can have that great straight line speed. It's nice, but it's something that I don't think is everything. We'll get to IRL HDR's comment, but just sticking with the Giants before we get to some more of your questions. The Chaz open as always. One of the things with the Giants too that's also come out too, which isn't getting as much publicity, but it is very important, is how the Giants are trying to work around their cap hell situation. I mean, they've already cut Kyle Rudolph, they've cut Devin Booker, likely going to cut Blake Martinez next, 8.5 million cap hit, and the Giants are saying they're trying to get to 40 million in cap space. I believe at the end of the day, they're probably going to get closer to 25, 30, 40 is really hard. And especially one of the biggest elephants in the room is going to be Saquon, as we talked about, or James Bradbury. Now, Bradbury, $12 million if freed up, but a $9.7 million penalty. So Bradbury's going to be interesting. 28. Do the Giants try to renegotiate a contract or redo, because he's in the final year of his deal, or do they try to redo his contract, kick the money down the road, kind of a little bit what the Jets did with CJ Mosley, and kind of try to backload the deal to try to open up some more cap space? I think that's more likely with Bradbury, because also the Giants are in a tough position because they have a lot of money invested in players, but you wouldn't say that they're A players. But if you get rid of them, I don't see how they're going to really replace James Bradbury. And there's so many holes on this team. You can't just be cutting players just to just save some salary when you're going to need players to fill that salary anyway. So it's going to be interesting. Giants are said that they're open for business, and this gets to IRL HDR's question here. The Giants are shopping Bradbury for a 3. Think the Jets should bite. I think Bradbury's a very good player. I would say if I'm the Jets, he would be the contingency plan. Now, a lot of the news around the combine has also come out that JC Jackson wants to reset the cornerback market. And I do believe he's going to get an absolutely insane contract. Now, the Jets have the cap space to do that. But in some regards, I almost think that Stephon Gilmore would be a better fit. And I get Gilmore is an older player, and Gilmore might not be in his prime anymore, but he's still an elite corner. And for Joe Douglas, it kind of fits what he would like to do. And it kind of fits more like what the Jets like to do, which is, we saw it last free agency. They love to give big number contracts, but front load them. And Gilmore, to me, if you're the Jets and you could give Gilmore like 16, 17 million a year, but front load it so it's a 3-year contract and it's really only a 2-year contract that you can get out of with minimal penalties on the back end, that to me is a more better fit than JC Jackson, because I do think JC Jackson is going to get a huge bag. And the question becomes, like, do the Jets, if they really believe in him, do they give him the bag? And I wouldn't hate it, but in some regards, Gilmore kind of fits a little bit more of what Richard Sherman was when he came to the 49ers. Maybe a little bit longer in the tooth than you would have liked, but still a very good corner, still a high-end player, still a ball hawk. And for the Jets, yes, they'll have to pay him a lot of money, but he would still be a number one. Now, Bradbury, to me, like, he's a low-end number one. That experience would be incredibly invaluable for the Jets, and I wouldn't hate it, but to me, it would kind of come after the Jets, because one thing the Jets have said at the combine is that if the right deal's there, they're going to strike. Um, and if it's there, go for it. And you look right now, Bradbury, one-time Pro Bowl in 2020, not coming off his best year. But the one nice thing about Bradbury that he has been able to do in his career that really the Jets corners, and I like a lot of the Jets corners, but they do struggle at getting interceptions. And Bradbury in a 6-year career has 15 interceptions, still 28 years old. But here's the I know the Giants are saying they want a third, but I almost think like the Jets could maybe get him for a fourth. And here's the big reason why is the contract. It's basically a 1-year contract on the back end of it. So, and the Jets, their third round pick is very high. I mean, they have a great third round pick. I mean, within the top 70, which is especially in this kind of draft, is an incredibly valuable pick. So, if they can maybe trade back, get an extra three, and then trade the three, but I wouldn't hate Bradbury. I know some Jet fans wouldn't like that. But one of the other things I like about Bradbury, too, is he's been durable. I mean, outside of his rookie year, we only played 13 games. He's played 16, 16, 15, 15, and 17. Uh, I wouldn't hate it, but Bradbury for me is more of the backup plan for the Jets. And for the Giants, it's kind of interesting too because you see them loading up on threes. Does that mean they're trying to get more second round picks? Because Jets have the 2 second round picks. The Giants only have the 1. So maybe the Giants are trying to get more players into that, or they're trying to get ammo to go back into the first round. Assuming you watched the entire draft as well, which player do you think improved his stock yesterday and which lost ground? I don't think a lot of players lost ground, but one kid, and I will say this, full disclosure, I should have put him on my latest big board. He was not on this last big board, but he should have been there. My apologies. And especially after the Senior Bowl, but I felt really stupid after the combine. That's Christian Watson, the wide receiver from North Dakota State. And I know that there was a graphic that made Jet fans probably panic where you saw like the best combine grades and it was Stephen Hill right next to Christian Watson. But I really liked Watson at the Senior Bowl because of his size and how fluid he ran routes, had really soft hands. He looked like a legitimate great receiver. But then at the combine, at 6'4" and 208 pounds yesterday, he ran. I'm just going to double check this for you because it was unofficially a 4.28 last night. But for some reason, like the 40s were off last night and now they've become more official today. I'm just trying to see what his 40 was today. So they did give him a 4.36, but he's 6'4", 208 pounds and running a 4.36. But he also had the biggest broad jump and also a 38 and a half foot, 38 and a half inch vertical. To me, he was a kid like we've talked a lot about the big 5 receivers, but I do think he's almost entered the first round, late first round conversation or early second round. And if you're the Jets or the Giants, this is someone you should keep an eye on because big outside receiver. And one of the things that could help in a weird way is the lack of games. Now, I know a lot of teams are worried about the lack of tape in games, but don't forget, Watson went to a program where, because of COVID, they played that one weird Trey Lance game to give Trey Lance a tryout game. I mean, I've never seen that before, and I don't think we'll ever see that again. But then he goes this last year, highly productive despite the lack of quarterback play. And I mean, I do know those lower divisions get a bad rap, but you look at the production at the Senior Bowl, he to me was the biggest standout receiver, not only because of his size and his great route running ability, but he just made plays. And when you look at a big outside guy, I do think he fits the mold, but I just really think he improved his stock last night, not just because of the 40. I knew he was going to run a great 40, but when you look at the vertical and the broad jump, and the other one too is someone I've been banging the table for, and that's Chris Olavey. And Ran an official 4.37, 4.28 unofficially, but he did run a faster time than his teammate Williams. And I've been saying this and banging the table for Olave, and I almost feel like he's kind of put himself in that third receiver conversation this draft. I mean, we talk about Burks, we talk about London, we talk about Williams, obviously, but I think you got to put Olave in that mix to be one of the top 2 or 3 receivers off the board because I know he's not the biggest at 6'1", but he's a great route runner. He's able to create separation. And you saw with the speed last night, he does have game-changing speed. And that's been one of the knocks I kept hearing from people was like, well, he's not as explosive as Williams. Oh, he's not as explosive as his teammate. He ran a faster 40 than his teammate last night. So I haven't been getting why Chris Olave has been in love. I mean, even last year in a much better receiving class, if he came out in the draft last year, there's talk he was probably going to be a mid-second round pick, and all he did was get better and have a better season. So I don't think that there was really someone last night that killed their stock. I guess if we were talking the quarterbacks, I thought Malik Willis lit it up. Uh, he's the number one quarterback on my board, and I've changed my board significantly where I only have one quarterback in the top 50 now, and that's Malik Willis. And I've been saying this for Willis is I've been looking at his athleticism. It's just better than everyone else, and it's really something that stands out. And you saw the way he was pushing the ball down the field last night. I mean, he's got a big arm. Now, I also take last night with a grain of salt because he's also throwing with no pads on, and throwing with pads does make a big difference. So, I'm not just trying to rain on his parade, but I did think he did really well, and I do believe he's going to be someone. He's going to be the first quarterback on the board, and I didn't think he'd be a top 10 pick, but with the lack of quarterbacks in this draft and with the lack of quarterbacks in this league, I do feel like he's cemented. He's going to go somewhere in the top 10. And this is one thing I wanted to put out to Giant fans too, and you can let me know what you think in the chat is when you were watching Willis last night and when you were watching the tape, did the thought cross your mind that you would prefer Willis going to next season? And I did put this on Twitter last night, and I did get a lot of vitriol saying, well, we wouldn't have an offensive line. And I get that. But I do wonder if Brian Dable was watching last night and Joe Shannon going, look, if he's sitting there at 5, yeah, we want a quarterback next year, but we don't know what really next year's class. We have an idea what it's going to be, but we don't really know what next year's class is going to be. Do we take the risk that we're not going to get a great quarterback next year and draft Malik Willis this year? Because they also have 2 first-round picks. I mean, the Giants could easily get someone with the 5th pick, and if Malik Willis is sitting there with the 7th pick, do the Giants just say, look, we're in a full rebuild. Let's just start the clock right now with Malik Willis. So, Giant fans, let me know in the chat what you think. Malik Willis, yes or no? IRL HDR, I'd love if the Jets go Gilmore route. It'd be great to have a vet like him to teach the young guys. And my thoughts exactly. Watson blew my mind. He scored such a high grade off the combine yesterday. I think Burks had an extremely underwhelming day. And Burks, that's the thing. Like, people are piling on Burks. But his game is different than the other guys. And I do think he's a better fit for the Jets and what they're trying to do. Like, you look at what and he even said he tried to model his game after Deebo Samuels. And he's basically got the linebacker build playing wide receiver. You draft Traylon Burks because of his physicality, because of his ability on the 50-50 balls. But more importantly, if you're the Jets, and this is why I had him going to the Jets in my latest mock draft, they trade back in the first round to get him, is yeah, the Jets might want a more explosive player on the outside, but with this creative offense that LaFleur runs, where you see them put the ball in the receiver's hands to run, Burks might be the receiver in this draft that the Jets want the most because of the versatility. Because at Arkansas, he did line up in the backfield. He did line up in the slides, lined up on the outside. You could move him around as a valuable chess piece where on first down, he's in the backfield and you could fake a handoff or give him a handoff. On second down, you can do a wide receiver sweep with him or fake a wide receiver sweep. And then you could also throw it to him on the outside. There's a lot he can do. But if you were expecting Burks to come out last night and run like a 4.3, that really isn't his game. Like Olave, Dotson, Dotson was a little bit more surprising, but I do really believe that just looking at last night that there was a lot of great receivers, but you looked at them like even the kid from Baylor who had the fastest 40 time speed. That's his go-to is his speed. If he had a bad 40 time, that would have killed his stock. And Burks, I get it, you want him to run as fast as possible, but what he does best isn't really dictated by the 40 time. And I do believe the 40 is a little overrated because, again, guys train to run the 40-yard dash. I mean, they train to run it. This isn't a situation where, like, the last 3 months, they've been practicing, they've been going through it, and they've been, like, mapping out, like, each step down to the point of which step they're going to take. And I know that sounds crazy, but I have seen players do that. So, Stefano, a report out by Adam Schefter about the Cowboys likely releasing Cooper. I'm just going to check on good old Adam Schefter's Twitter to see what Mr. Shefty has to say. Let's see. Are likely to release by the start of the league. Cooper's due $20 million, fully guaranteed money on the 5th day of the new year. There's a lot of receivers out there for the Jets, and if I'm the Jets, I would lean. And actually, Phil Yates just came out with this, so like I was slightly wrong, so I apologize. So in case someone wants to point this out, but Garrett Wilson ran a 4.38 last night. Chris Olave 4.39 last night. So Olave I had put earlier, but now at the official time, I think that's annoying me too. Is like last night we had unofficial, today we had the official, but still like. I will still say with Olave, he still proved to me he's a great player because all I've heard is like Garrett Wilson's a more explosive player, but they're a tenth of a second difference in the 40 time. I mean, that really isn't a difference. But if I'm the Jets, like I've been saying this too, which is they need to get a great receiver, but I would not go the trade route because I do believe you're going to have to give up a lot to get a great receiver. And the one that's going to be on the market is Calvin Ridley. And if you can get him for a good deal, I would pull the trigger if you feel like he's in a good space with his mental health. But the Jets have that cap space. So I look at this offseason and you look, Allen Robinson and Amari Cooper are right there. Now, the big question is, where's Amari at this point in his career? Because Allen Robinson has been with a bad Bears team. He could want to win, but he's also only had the franchise tag. He hasn't gotten the bag necessarily. But you look at Amari Cooper, 27 years old, 4 1,000-yard seasons. He's going to have a big market, but my big question for him is going to be, does he want to win or does he want to get another big contract? Because if he wants a big contract, the Jets are the team that could give it to him. But if he wants to win and win a Super Bowl, does that change the way he attacks free agency? Because every player is different. And the way the NFL timeline now is, some of these players is a lot shorter. I mean, we just saw Ali Lampard, the great guard from the Buccaneers at 28, just retired. And to me, that is something very interesting to keep an eye on. So, and you look too, like with Amari Cooper, he's made a good amount of money in his career. I mean, his rookie deal has been good. I mean, I'm just looking at trying to find out what his career earnings are at this point, but he's earned well over $40 million. So does he want to go to a great team? I mean, that's someone to go there. DJ Chark, is he on? I don't know if he's on the market, but Chark's not a number one. The Jets need a legitimate number one. Cooper gives them a number one. Allen Robinson gives them a number one. I don't think that. Nick Chaplin, I would love to hear what you would have to say to this. What I'm going to say is I wouldn't pick up Cooper Robinson. I would stay away. And my question is why? Because this is a good receiving class. It's not great. And my big thing is the Jets have the cap space, and if you're able to go and invest, and I've said this about the safety position with Kyle Hamilton, but if the Jets are able to go out and invest in a great safety in the free agency period, and they go out and get a receiver in the free agency period, it makes it easier because then the Jets all of a sudden can be a little bit more flexible in the draft and be able to go out there and get different pieces to help improve this team. And on top of that, you're not giving up an asset to go and get a wide receiver. Your biggest asset is cash, and the Jets have the cap space. And like the Giants, I do think you're going to see them clear up even more. I mean, they got Greg Van Roten, they could get rid of Ryan Griffin. I do think by the time the Jets get to the free agency period, they're going to have closer to $60 million in cap space. And if Amari Cooper, you have to give him $20 million a year for 4 years or 5 years at 27, I wouldn't hate that. I mean, he's been a very good receiver. Now, would I say he's an elite number one? No. Is he like a Stephon Diggs? No, but what he does bring is he's a great route runner. He gets open. He's highly productive. And when he's on the field, you have to take note of him. And if you put Cooper on the field with Corey Davis and Elijah Moore, it's going to be a headache to cover them. So I do believe that that is good news for the Jets. Another big time receiver hitting the free agency market. But I mean, both teams, the interesting thing too is, and if you guys want to ask me more about the prospects from last night, go ahead. But actually, let me stay with the prospects for a second. Then I'll get to both these teams. But one of the great questions was before, was there another player that hurt their stock? And it's kind of funny because everyone was making fun of this yesterday, but was the hand size was Kenny Pickett, which he had the hand size of 8.5. And the only quarterback that's really had that small of hands and gone in the first round has been Michael Vick. And look, hand size, I get both sides of the argument. It's not that big of a deal. It's how well they can play. But if we're talking about hand size, it also helps too when we're talking about holding the ball when someone's going to hit your hand and try and knock the football out, or when it's colder weather, can you get a better grip on the football? Having a bigger hand does help get a better grip on the football. But this is the thing, like, and I kept seeing some boards where Kenny Pickett is the number one quarterback. And I just don't see it. And the one thing that drives me nuts is this narrative out there, which is, well, Joe Burrow didn't pop till he was late in his college career, like Kenny Pickett. There's a huge difference where Joe Burrow was at Ohio State, who was in the college football playoff competing for a national championship every single year. And yeah, was it weird that he couldn't get on the field for that team? Sure. But when you look at how many great players are on that team, and think about how many players we've seen at Alabama. I mean, you look at Alabama, the great receiver for them this year was from Ohio State, and he couldn't get on the field. So he then goes to LSU and then lights it up, and now the rest is history. Joe Burrow with the Bengals. There's a huge difference between playing in the SEC and the best Big Ten program than playing at Pittsburgh in the ACC. And when you're popping as a fifth year, I do have questions, and everyone is different. I completely understand that. But a lot of these players, like some of them only had one great year of film, but that's all you really needed to see. And when I look at Pickett, it's like, okay, I do think he can be a good quarterback in the NFL. But if I'm investing a first round pick in him, I just don't see him being a first round pick. I really don't. I just don't see it because he's a good athlete, not great. Good arm, not great. Like everything with him is just like it just seems like average to above average. There isn't anything I really that really stands out to me. But it is funny because two big interviews for the Giants yesterday stood out to me. One was Zion Johnson, the guard out of Boston College. Jets love this kid also, but he is someone that I would keep an eye on because I have a feeling he's going to be sitting there, even though he's the best guard in this class. I have a feeling he's going to be sitting there in the early 20s, and I would not be shocked if either New York team decides to go up from the second round and grab him in the first round, because he, to me, is going to be a 10 to 12 year really good starter and a really good guard. And if you're the Giants and you look at that offensive line, it could not hurt. But one of the most interesting interviews was for the Giants, which this is something to keep an eye on for the Giants, is Matt Corral. They had an interview with him. And I understand that it's just an interview. They're probably interviewing every quarterback at the combine, but Corral's going to be very interesting because of his injury at the end of the season. If there's a chance he falls to the second round, could the Giants pull the trigger and take him in the second round and just look at it as a situation where they go, hey, we had a great first round grade on this quarterback. He was sitting there. It's someone to push Daniel Jones. In worst case scenario, they have him in there in their building. They get to see what he can do. I mean, that is something else to keep an eye on too with the Giants is, do they use that second round pick if a quarterback falls to take someone? Let's see what other questions that we have here in the chat. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. As always, the new big board is up in the channel. I did my new top 50. If you want to check that out, of course, always follow us and add to the community page. This is why we're doing this video today, is because I asked the community what you would like me to do. Do you want me to talk about the Jets and Giants draft, or do you want me to talk about my big board? And you guys overwhelmingly said to do this. So Tate Dulcich really stood out to me, especially with the Matt Mean mustache. Yeah, like he's a really explosive tight end. I actually still like McBride and Jeremy Ruckert over him, to be honest with you, but did have the most impressive display as a tight end yesterday. And for both teams, could be an explosive player. I wonder if he's going to be enough of a blocker to fit the Jet scheme, but overall, I do think he has to be in conversation for both teams. Willis with more raw talent, that arm strength makes him more attractive than Pickett. Even Carson Strong, some memorable moments with his arm strength. Yeah, Carson Strong, though, he was the third quarterback on my board after Corral. I actually have Pickett at fourth on my board, and I know a lot of people will say that's crazy, but Strong, though, the big thing's going to be his medicals. I mean, he has that chronic knee injury that he's had 3 surgeries on, and it's funny because I keep saying this about him. If the medicals check out, depending on his medicals and how comfortable team feels, like he can go anywhere from being a first round pick to an undrafted free agency. Like he's got the biggest range of any quarterback, because if a team goes in or teams go in and see this is going to be a need that's going to get injured again, and it's going to affect his athleticism, it's going to be something that's going to be affecting him. If you're a team looking for a quarterback, and let's be honest, you're looking for a quarterback that you want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in, do you really feel comfortable putting the hands of your franchise in someone with a chronic knee issue? And especially if you're a coaching staff that, I mean, if it's a team later in the first round that might look to develop him, then maybe. But if you're looking for him to start this year, I would be worried as a team, because you saw this last year, the coaches that got fired was because of the quarterback. And if you're a coach or GM, are you putting your reputation on the line for someone with a chronic knee issue? And I'm not sure if that will be how that's going to turn out, but really will come down to his medicals. Don't get me wrong, Cooper's very talented, but he's a number 1 or a number 2 receiver. Why would the Cowboys come if he was that special? Well, it was their cap hit. I mean, the Cowboys are in cap hell. I mean, they're paying Dak a huge amount of money. They're paying Zeke a huge amount of money. And don't forget, too, like they also have so many receivers. I mean, they drafted CD Lamb. They do have that good young player this year, number 1. I keep forgetting his name. I think Cedric Wilson. But they have CD Lamb. They have who's the other one? They have so many receivers. I mean, the Cowboys have so many receivers, and really when they brought in Cooper, it was to help Dak when he was a little bit younger. I feel like they think he's at the point now where they feel comfortable enough that Dak has improved enough that He doesn't necessarily need the security blanket, but you also look, they are, oh, Gallup, thank you very much. They're at the point too now where the Cowboys, they have so many weapons that they they can afford to lose one. And Cooper's gonna would be a loss, but you look, I do think they're gonna franchise tag Dalton Schultz because they don't think they're gonna improve the tight end position. But the Cowboys have also been incredibly good at drafting wide receivers. And it's a situation where it's kind of like the Steelers with Juju Smith-Schuster, and why I don't believe he's coming back is those organizations, yeah, they might feel like they take a hit for a year at that position, but they always seem to draft the wide receiver position incredibly well. And for Dallas, I mean, they're not afraid to take a receiver in the first round, but they also might look at this draft and go, look, the draft every year is giving us so many great receivers. It's giving us so many great receivers that if we're going to have to cut somewhere, it's hard to find a great pass rusher. It's hard to find a great corner, but if the draft's going to give us good receivers and someone that we can get a solid receiver in the second or third round, and yeah, it'll be a loss of production, but it won't be a huge difference. That's why I think the Cowboys are looking to do that, and it's also the cap space. The Cowboys are in a terrible cap situation. By cutting Cooper, they saved $20 million, and by saving $20 million, like, can they go out and add more pieces to that defense? Can they go out and add more offensive line? Because the biggest strength for Dallas has always been their offensive line, but even that now is starting to get a bit long in the tooth. So I wonder if they're going to try to use some of that money to reinvest, just a little bit. So, any other questions today? As always, thank you for joining us. The big board is updated. That's in the chat as well today. Any other final comments on the Jets or the Giants at the combine? I know we talked about the quarterbacks a bit. We talked about the Giants making all the cap cuts. We talked a little bit about the Jets. I mean, both teams also. I guess one of the big final points today is and this shouldn't come as a surprise, but both teams were asked about their trade prospects, and they said it's come out that both teams are looking to trade down. I don't think that's a shock. Both teams need a lot, and this is a draft where there isn't a lot of great, but there's a lot of very good. And if you can get more picks in that first 50 to 60 range, you can get a lot more players. So a lot of it's all going to come down to who's sitting there. If a great player sitting there at 4 or 5 for the Jets, or the Giants, it's gonna be hard pressed to pass on them. But with their second first round picks, especially 7 and 10, if a team gets desperate for a quarterback or they feel that they can get similar talent later on, definitely keep an eye on those picks. And just because they also saying they'll trade down, don't be surprised if they trade back up. Both with their high second round picks, both with ammo, Jets with multiple 4s, Giants with multiple 3s. Or don't be surprised, too, if they trade back into the first round of the 20s to get someone. So don't be surprised if they trade back from one of the first 2 first-round picks, but also don't be surprised if they somehow get back into the first round either. So, but that's also the big news, too, as everyone's playing the chat. Amari Cooper, according to Adam Schefter, going to be likely cut before the new year to save $20 million. I mean, 20 fully guaranteed for this upcoming season. So, yeah, Taquan Thornton, 4.28, 40 times. So, again, those 40 times are coming a little bit official today. So, there was no 4.21. But it's interesting, too, because I did put up this question. No Giant fan asked me. I was like, after last night, would you be more willing to draft Malik Willis? But haven't seen anything in the chat yet. But just want to thank you guys for hopping on with us today. Really appreciate it as always. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on Twitter for all of our latest draft coverage. And, of course, richsportstalk.com for our big board. Really appreciate it, guys. Going to have more videos coming out next week. More mock drafts are being made. And, of course, we'll have the 7-rounders for both teams once we get past free agency. But, as always, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back here. Make sure you catch our next live stream here on Rich Sports Talk. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.